Alyssa Grant had never been a superstitious woman, but on that gray Wednesday morning she found herself standing frozen on the sidewalk, as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. At 35, newly divorced and trying to rebuild a life that felt cracked in too many places, she believed she had already survived her share of chaos. Yet nothing in her past compared to the moment an elderly homeless woman reached up, grabbed her wrist, and whispered a warning that sliced through her calm like a cold blade. Every morning on her walk to work, Alyssa passed the woman who sat near the entrance of the Marshall Street station. While commuters hurried past without a glance, Alyssa always stopped, dropping a few coins into the small metal cup resting by the woman's shoes. The woman's name was Dorothy Miles. Though wrapped in a faded coat and worn boots, she carried a quiet dignity that reminded Alyssa of her late grandmother. That morning, Alyssa crouched down the way she always did, offering a small greeting. But before she could speak, Dorothy's hand closed around her wrist with surprising strength. Her voice trembled as she leaned close. "Do not go home tonight. No matter what happens, stay away from your apartment." Alyssa froze, startled. She tried to pull her hand free, but Dorothy held on for one more breath, her tired eyes filled with something Alyssa had never seen in them before. Fear. Real, urgent fear. "Please listen. Something bad is coming. Stay anywhere else but home." Dorothy released her and turned her gaze back to the ground, as though the moment had drained every bit of energy she had. On the train, Alyssa kept replaying those words. Dorothy had never said anything strange before, never shown signs of confusion. So why today? Why this warning? Hours later, Alyssa would understand, and she would realize that the only reason she was still alive was because she listened. Before her life unraveled into warnings and fire, Alyssa Grant had been trying to stitch together the pieces of a life she once believed would last forever. Just 6 months earlier, she had been married, living in a cozy 2-bedroom townhouse, and imagining a future filled with the kind of steady comfort she had always wanted. But comfort vanished quickly when her marriage collapsed under the weight of quiet resentment and broken promises. Her ex-husband, Connor, had drifted away long before he admitted it. Alyssa tried to save what they had, but eventually she realized she was the only one still trying. The divorce was clean on paper but messy in her heart. She packed her belongings, moved into a small apartment on the east side of Charlotte, and told herself she would rebuild, one step at a time. Work became her anchor. After leaving her job at a larger corporation, where too many coworkers whispered pity behind sympathetic smiles, Alyssa accepted a position at a small accounting firm called Oak Ridge Financial Services. The company was tucked inside an aging brick office building downtown. From the outside it looked modest, almost invisible, but the quiet routine it offered was exactly what she needed. Inside the firm, the staff was small. The owner, Leonard Briggs, a man with a constantly furrowed brow, rarely spoke more than necessary. 2 assistants occupied the front office, and Alyssa worked in a small room across from the break area. Her tasks were simple: process monthly reports, handle invoices, and reconcile accounts. After years of high-pressure environments, the simplicity felt like a blessing. And despite the tension that sometimes lingered in the air, Alyssa found comfort in the work. Numbers did not lie. Paperwork did not judge. It gave her structure when everything else felt unstable. But even in the calmest routines, small things sometimes tugged at her attention. A payment that seemed oddly large, a vendor name she had never seen before, or the uneasy way Leonard dismissed her questions. Each time Alyssa brushed it off. She wanted peace, not problems. She had no idea that the peace she clung to was nothing more than a thin shell over something dangerous, something that would soon reach for her life. Alyssa never meant to form a bond with Dorothy Miles. It began with something small, the kind of gesture most people overlook in the rush of their daily commute. On her first week working downtown, Alyssa had noticed the elderly woman sitting near the station entrance, wrapped in layers of worn fabric, her gray hair tucked beneath that knitted hat that had long lost its shape. Most commuters passed without looking. Some stepped around her as if she were part of the sidewalk, but Alyssa could not. Maybe it was the way Dorothy kept her back straight despite the cold. Maybe it was the faint, polite smile she offered anyone who paused. Or maybe Alyssa saw in her the same quiet resilience she remembered in her grandmother, a woman who had endured hardship with grace. Whatever the reason, Alyssa found herself stopping every morning, even on days when she was tired or running late. she would still reach into her pocket, drop a small handful of coins into the metal cup, and greet Dorothy softly. Dorothy would lift her head, nod once, and whisper a thank you, her voice raspy but gentle. Over time, their exchanges grew a little longer. Alyssa would ask if Dorothy was warm enough, if she needed anything. Dorothy, always composed, always humble, would insist she was fine. Sometimes she shared small memories raising her 2 kids, her years working at a sewing factory, or the way Charlotte had changed since she was young. Alyssa felt an unexpected comfort during those conversations. Dorothy listened without judgment. She never pried, never asked about Alyssa's divorce or her life. Instead, she offered the kind of presence that felt steady, grounding, and strangely protective. Alyssa had no way of knowing that this quiet bond, formed on cold mornings and simple kindness, would one day be the reason she survived. The morning of the warning should have been like any other. Alyssa tried to shake off the strange feeling Dorothy's words had planted in her chest, telling herself it was nothing more than worry from an elderly woman worn down by years on the street. She forced her mind back into its usual rhythm as she walked into the lobby of Oak Ridge Financial Services. But even the office felt different that day. As she stepped through the front door, she noticed the new security guard, Dean Walker, standing near the elevators. He had only been with the building a few weeks, and Alyssa had barely exchanged more than a greeting with him. Today, however, he watched her more intently than usual. "Morning, Miss Grant," he said, his tone casual but his eyes too focused. Alyssa offered a polite smile. "Morning." He leaned slightly forward, as though making conversation. "You live around here, right? Is your place close to the station?" The question hit her with an unexpected jolt. Dean had never spoken more than 5 words to her before. Now he wanted to know where she lived. Her pulse ticked upward, and Dorothy's trembling voice echoed in her mind. "I'm not far," she replied carefully, keeping her expression neutral. "Why do you ask?" Dean shrugged, pretending disinterest as he straightened his uniform jacket. "Just chatting. Long commutes can be rough." Alyssa nodded and walked past him, the hairs on the back of her neck lifting. Something about his tone, his timing, felt wrong. She tried to brush it off, but unease settled stubbornly in her stomach. Hours later, while she was reviewing monthly statements, Leonard Briggs stepped into her small office. He looked restless, tapping a folder against his palm. "Alyssa, about these March invoices," he said, dropping the folder on her desk. "Did you check that all signatures were in place?" She frowned, flipping through the papers. She had checked them. Twice. Yet 3 of the invoices were missing the client authorization signatures that were always required. "These were signed when I processed them," she said quietly. "I'm sure of it." Leonard stiffened. His eyes flicked away for a second too long before he forced a thin smile. "Oh, must be a mix-up somewhere," he muttered. "Forget it. I'll handle it." But as he hurried out of her office, Alyssa felt the first cold ripple of dread. Something was happening, something she had brushed off for too long. The rest of the afternoon crawled by, each minute weighed down by a tension Alyssa could not shake. She tried to lose herself in spreadsheets and invoices, but her thoughts kept circling back to the same 3 moments: Dorothy's trembling warning, Dean's unsettling question, and Leonard's nervous reaction when she pointed out the missing signatures. One coincidence was nothing. 2 coincidences made her pause, but 3 in a single day felt like a pattern she would be foolish to ignore. By 5:30, Alyssa was tapping her pen against her desk, her breath shallow. She told herself she was overreacting. She told herself Leonard's moodiness was typical, that Dorothy might have been confused, that Dean was simply trying to make conversation. But the truth kept pressing against her ribs. Something was wrong. When the office lights dimmed for closing time, Alyssa packed her bags slowly. She walked to the elevator, hesitated, and then turned toward the stairwell instead. She did not want another encounter with Dean. She took the stairs 2 at a time and slipped into the evening air. Outside, she stopped at the corner, staring toward the direction of her apartment. She imagined unlocking her door, dropping her keys onto the table, making a simple dinner, going to bed. The life she knew, the life she wanted back. But Dorothy's voice cut through her thoughts again. "Do not go home tonight?" A shiver ran down her spine. Alyssa exhaled shakily, pulled out her phone, and searched for the nearest cheap hostel. Within minutes, she booked a bunk bed in a shared room. She walked away from the route that would have taken her home. She did not know it then, but that decision would save her life. The hostel was nothing special, just an old brick building wedged between a closed bakery and a pawn shop. Inside, the air smelled faintly of detergent and cheap air freshener. Alyssa checked in, climbed the narrow stairs to the shared room, and settled onto the lower bunk with her bag pulled close. The room was quiet, dimly lit, and mostly empty. She told herself she would sleep a few hours, clear her mind, and figure things out in the morning. But sleep refused to come. She lay awake listening to unfamiliar footsteps in the hallway, the hum of pipes in the walls and the distant noise of traffic. Every sound made her more certain she had done the right thing by staying away from home, though she still had no idea why. Just after 4 o'clock, her phone buzzed violently on the metal nightstand. She jolted upright. The screen lit up with the name of her best friend, Tessa Brooks. "Alyssa, answer. Please answer." Alyssa swiped to accept the call, her voice groggy. "Tessa, what is it?" "Are you safe?" Tessa's voice was frantic, breathless. "Tell me you are not home." "No, I'm at a hostel. Why? What happened?" A heavy pause. Then Tessa's voice cracked. "Your building is on fire. They are showing it on the news. It started on your floor. Alyssa, it is bad." Alyssa felt her entire body go numb. She pushed herself off the bed, her legs trembling. She could barely form words. "My floor, are you sure?" "Yes, fire trucks are everywhere. People are outside. They are saying the 4th floor is destroyed." Alyssa pressed a hand to her mouth as her eyes stung. Her apartment, every piece of the life she had left, burned, gone. She whispered, almost to herself, "If I had gone home." The terrifying truth settled over her like cold water. Dorothy Miles had saved her life. At sunrise, Alyssa stood outside the caution tape surrounding the charred remains of her apartment building. Smoke still drifted from the upper floors, and firefighters moved in and out carrying equipment. Neighbors huddled on the sidewalk, wrapped in blankets, whispering to one another in disbelief. Alyssa stared at the blackened windows of the 4th floor, feeling both hollow and shaken. She stayed until the morning light turned soft and pale. Then, remembering Dorothy's words, she left the crowd and walked quickly toward the Marshall Street station. Her heart thudded painfully with every step. She needed answers. Dorothy was already there, sitting on her usual piece of cardboard, her coat pulled tightly around her thin shoulders. When she looked up and saw Alyssa, relief washed over her features. "Thank God, dear, you listened." Alyssa crouched in front of her, her voice trembling. "Dorothy, what did you know? How did you know something was going to happen?" The elderly woman nodded slowly, then reached into a faded cloth bag at her side. She pulled out an old flip phone with a cracked screen and handed it to Alyssa. "Look." Alyssa clicked through the photos. The images were grainy, taken in low light, but clear enough to recognize her building. 2 men stood in the alley beside it. One held a gas can, the other kept glancing around nervously. Another swipe showed their faces. Alyssa's breath caught. One of them was Dean Walker, the security guard, the man who had asked where she lived. "I saw them the night before," Dorothy said softly. "They were talking about you. They said your name clear as day. They said tomorrow would be the end of you. I took pictures so someone would believe me." Alyssa gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles whitened. Fear pulsed through her chest. Dorothy's voice wavered. "When I heard them coming back last night with more cans, I ran to the next building and called for help. But it was too late. I tried to warn you in the morning because you were kind to me. Nobody else is kind anymore." Alyssa's eyes stung. She reached out, gently covering Dorothy's hands. "You didn't just warn me, you saved my life." Dorothy nodded, her chin trembling. "Then go to the police now, dear, before they realize you are still alive." Alyssa did not waste another second. With Dorothy's phone clutched in her hand, she hurried out of the station and made her way straight to the nearest police precinct. The building was busy that morning, officers moving swiftly through the halls, phones ringing nonstop, but Alyssa barely noticed anything except the pounding of her own heartbeat. At the front desk, she managed to say, "I need to report an attempted murder." The officer behind the counter blinked in surprise, then directed her to a small office at the end of the hallway. Inside sat Detective Samuel Drake, a tall man in his mid-40s with steady eyes and a calm presence that felt strangely grounding. He motioned for her to sit. "Tell me everything," he said. Alyssa did. She started with Dorothy, then the photos, the men with the gas cans, and the fire. Drake listened carefully, taking notes without interrupting. When she handed him the phone, he studied the pictures, zooming in on the faces. "You know this man?" he asked. Alyssa nodded. "The one on the left. That is Dean Walker, the security guard at my office building. He asked where I lived yesterday." Drake's expression hardened. "All right, we will process these images immediately. But I need you to avoid going anywhere crowded or predictable. If they think you survived, they may try again." The room suddenly felt colder. "Detective," Alyssa whispered, "why would anyone want to kill me?" Drake closed his notebook. "That is what we are about to find out. But based on what you have told me, I suspect you stumbled onto something at work without realizing it." He stood and opened the door for her. "Go stay with someone you trust. Do not go home. Do not go near your office. I will contact you as soon as we have something." Alyssa nodded, her legs unsteady as she left the precinct. Whatever was happening was bigger than she had imagined. And she was no longer running from a coincidence. She was running from people who wanted her gone. Alyssa left the precinct feeling like the city around her had tilted off its axis. The streets looked the same, cars still rushed by, people still hurried to work, but nothing felt normal. She called her closest friend, Tessa Brooks, and explained everything in a breathless rush. Tessa insisted she come straight to her apartment on the north side of town. Once Alyssa arrived, Tessa pulled her inside and locked the door behind them. "Sit. Tell me everything again, slowly this time." Alyssa replayed the events from Dorothy's warning to the photos and the detective's words. Tessa listened, her eyes wide, then stepped into her kitchen and returned with her laptop. "Okay," she said, "let us think this through. That whole conversation with your boss yesterday about missing signatures, you said it bothered you. Do you still have those files?" Alyssa hesitated, then remembered something. "I forwarded myself some reports a few days ago because I wanted to double-check them at home." She opened her email and dug through the folders until she found the messages she had sent herself. Several spreadsheets and scanned invoices appeared on the screen. Alyssa clicked through them, her brows tightening. Then she saw it. A payment for $92,000 made out to a company called Ridgeline Consulting. The amount was unusually large, the authorization signature looked suspiciously digital, and the company name did not match any vendor she knew. Tessa typed the business name into a public records search. Within seconds, a profile appeared. The company was newly formed, registered to a rundown mailbox center, with no website, no phone number, and no legitimate activity. "This is a shell company," Tessa said quietly. "Alyssa, this is fraud, serious fraud." Alyssa stared at the screen, her heart dropping. And suddenly everything clicked. The missing signatures, the nervous behavior, Dean's question, the fire. Someone at her office was stealing money. And they believed Alyssa had noticed. Detective Drake called Alyssa just after 7 that evening. His voice was firm but carried a note of urgency. "Alyssa, we verified the photos. One of the men is indeed Dean Walker. The other is still being identified. You need to stay where you are and avoid any public places." Alyssa nodded even though he could not see her. "I understand. Detective, there is something else. I found suspicious payments in the company records. I think Oak Ridge Financial is involved in something illegal." "Send everything you have to my email," Drake replied, "right now." Alyssa forwarded every document, screenshot, and file from her inbox. She and Tessa waited anxiously, barely speaking, each minute feeling heavier than the last. At 9:30, the detective called again. "Alyssa, we executed a search warrant on your office. We seized all financial records and Leonard Briggs's computer. Our preliminary review shows a series of fraudulent transfers totaling more than $500,000, all routed through multiple shell companies, including the one you discovered." Alyssa covered her mouth, stunned. "We also have confirmation that Briggs hired Walker 2 months ago without a background check," Drake continued. "Walker has a prior conviction for aggravated assault. He disappeared when we arrived, but he is now on the statewide alert list. We will find him." "What about Briggs?" Alyssa asked, her voice trembling. "He has been detained for questioning. He claims he knew nothing and is trying to pin everything on you." Alyssa felt her stomach drop. "On me." "It is a common tactic," Drake said, "but the digital correspondence on his computer suggests he was coordinating with another man named Logan Pierce. We believe Pierce and Walker carried out the arson on his orders. We are working to locate Pierce now." Alyssa sank into Tessa's couch as the weight of everything pressed down on her. The company she trusted was stealing money. Her boss had ordered her death. And the man who poured gasoline outside her building was still out there. The next morning brought a thin layer of sunlight through Tessa's curtains, but Alyssa felt none of its warmth. She had barely slept, jolting awake at every sound from the hallway outside. Yet when her phone rang at 8, she grabbed it instantly, hoping for news. Detective Drake's voice came through steady and controlled. "Alyssa, we located Dean Walker at the Greyhound station trying to board a bus out of state. He is in custody." He confessed during questioning. He admitted that Leonard Briggs paid him $10,000 to start the fire and make sure you did not survive. Alyssa closed her eyes as a shiver ran through her. Even hearing it confirmed felt unreal. Walker also named the second man in the photographs, Drake added, Logan Pierce. "We arrested him early this morning. Both men are cooperating and the evidence is strong." Alyssa let out a shaky breath. "So it is over." "For now, yes. Briggs has been formally arrested on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. You will need to give a full statement soon, but the immediate danger has passed." When the call ended, Alyssa sat back on the couch, her whole body trembling, not from fear this time but from release. Tessa wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "You are safe now," she said softly. "You made it through." Over the next week, Alyssa slowly began piecing her life back together. She met with investigators, secured her insurance claim for the destroyed apartment, and started searching for new work. With Tessa's encouragement, she applied to several accounting positions and eventually accepted a job at Harborstone Accounting Group, a reputable firm with a supportive environment. For the first time in months, Alyssa felt the faint but steady rise of hope. Her life had been burned to ashes, but she was finally rebuilding it. Even as Alyssa settled into her new job and began adjusting to a safer, steadier routine, her thoughts kept returning to Dorothy Miles. The elderly woman had saved her life without asking for anything in return. Alyssa visited her at the station every few days, bringing food, warm gloves, or simply a bit of conversation. Each time, Dorothy insisted she was fine, though her thin coat and tired eyes told a different story. One afternoon, after finishing her first week at Harborstone Accounting Group, Alyssa stopped by the station again. Dorothy was sitting in her usual place, hunched against the cold concrete wall. Alyssa crouched beside her. "Dorothy, you should not be out here like this. You need somewhere warm, somewhere safe." Dorothy gave a weary smile. "I have nowhere else, dear. I sleep where I can. I get by." Alyssa shook her head. "Not anymore. You helped me when you did not have to. Now it's my turn." That evening, Alyssa called Detective Drake to ask if he knew of any public programs for seniors. He gave her the contact information for a nearby assisted living facility called Willowview Haven, known for its compassionate staff and clean environment. Alyssa made an appointment and visited the next day. The director, a warm woman named Rachel Darden, greeted her with kindness. "We do have a room available," she explained. "If your friend is willing to come in, we can evaluate her and hopefully get her settled quickly." Alyssa returned to the station that same afternoon, her heart pounding with hope. Dorothy watched her approach, puzzled by her excitement. "Dorothy, I found a place, a real place, a room, meals, nurses, people who will care for you." The elderly woman's lips trembled. "Are you sure, dear? That sounds too good for someone like me." "It is not too good," Alyssa said firmly. "It is what you deserve." The next day, Alyssa helped her into a cab and brought her to Willowview Haven. Staff members welcomed her with gentle voices, offering clean clothes and warm tea. Dorothy's eyes filled with tears as she stepped into her small but cozy room. A bed with fresh linens, a nightstand, a window overlooking a courtyard. "Dear," she whispered, voice cracking, "I feel like I am dreaming." Alyssa squeezed her hand. "This dream is real, Dorothy, and it is yours now." For the first time in years, Dorothy Miles had a home. 2 months passed before Alyssa heard from Detective Drake again. The investigation was complete, and the trial dates were set. Briggs, Walker, and Pierce were all facing long prison sentences. Alyssa thought part of her life was finally behind her until she received an unexpected call from a man who introduced himself as Michael Turner, Briggs's attorney. "Ms. Grant, my client has requested to speak with you, only if you are willing. It would take place at the County Detention Center under full supervision. He says it concerns closure." Alyssa hesitated. Every instinct told her to refuse, but a quiet part of her needed to look the man who tried to end her life in the eye. She agreed. That Saturday, she walked through the sterile halls of the detention center and was led into a visitation room. A sheet of thick glass separated her from Leonard Briggs. He looked smaller than she remembered, his face drawn and pale, his once carefully groomed hair now graying at the temples. He picked up the phone slowly. Alyssa did the same. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you," Briggs began, "but I wanted to say I am sorry. I lost control. I made choices I can never undo." Alyssa remained silent, letting him speak. "I was drowning in debt. I thought the money would fix everything. And when you noticed something was off, I panicked. Instead of admitting what I did, I tried to erase the problem. I almost destroyed you because I was a coward." Alyssa finally spoke, her voice steady. "I do not forgive you. But I do not need to carry anger either. You will face the consequences of your choices. That is enough." Briggs nodded, tears gathering in his eyes. Alyssa hung up the phone, stood, and walked out of the facility with a sense of finality. The past was behind her now. Winter softened into spring, and for the first time in a long while, Alyssa felt her days filling with something lighter than fear. Her work at Harborstone Accounting Group was steady and honest. Her new apartment, shared with Tessa, was warm and full of laughter. And at Willowview Haven, Dorothy Miles was thriving in ways Alyssa had never imagined. Dorothy's cheeks had color now. She wore soft sweaters and comfortable shoes. She joined the morning exercise group and played cards with other residents in the afternoons. Every time Alyssa visited, Dorothy greeted her with the same wide, grateful smile. One Saturday in April, Alyssa arrived with a small birthday cake. Dorothy clapped her hands together when she saw it. "Dear, you spoil me," she said, but her eyes shone with joy. They sat by the window overlooking the courtyard, watching flowers beginning to bloom. Dorothy sliced a small piece of cake for each of them. "You know, dear," Dorothy said softly, "I spent years thinking kindness was something people had forgotten. But you showed me I was wrong. You reminded me that even a small act can ripple farther than we ever expect." Alyssa felt her throat tighten. "I only did what anyone should do." Dorothy shook her head. "No, most people walked past me every day. You stopped. You saw me. And because of that, we are both still here." They sat quietly for a moment, the sunlight warm around them. Alyssa knew she would carry Dorothy's words with her always. Life had nearly taken everything from her, but kindness had given it back unexpectedly, powerfully, and in a way she would never forget. As she left the facility, she looked back once more and smiled. Kindness might travel slowly, but it always finds its way home. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. Alyssa's story began with fear, confusion, and loss, but it grew into something far greater than she ever imagined. She learned that danger can hide behind ordinary faces, that courage sometimes looks like listening to a quiet warning, and that even small acts of compassion can alter the course of a life. Most importantly, she discovered that kindness is never wasted. It may take the long road back, but it always returns in ways we cannot predict. If this story touched you, take a moment to reflect on the people who have shown you kindness and the people who may need yours today. You never know whose life you might change with something as simple as a moment of attention. If you enjoyed the story, please like the video, share it with someone who might need a reminder of hope, and subscribe to the channel for more real-life narratives. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is. I always love reading your messages. Thank you for being here. Your presence means more than you know.